You didn't come this far by accident. You weren't just lucky. They underestimated you in every battle, storm, and crisis. It all led you here. And now, as you stand in your authority, unshakable and unstoppable, you realize something. You were never meant to fit in. Never meant to be ordinary. You were selected. You've been called. You didn't carry that weight for nothing. It was molding, perfecting, and preparing you for this very moment. They tried to break and imprison you. You sought to twist your light into something little and manageable. But the fire inside you was never meant to be restrained. It is too bright, pure, and divine to be dimmed by those who dread it. Now they can sense it. That shift in the air, that distinct presence, is the end of their influence over you. No more shrinking, explaining, or pleading for permission to be who you were created to be. Step into it. Own it. Your home, soul, and whole self. It is blessed not by them, not by circumstance, but by something far bigger. No force on earth can take it from you. Stand up, move forward, and never look back. The chosen. Do not beg for a seat at the table. We constructed our own. They've always employed the same strategies. Subtle jabs, deliberate silence, and the weight of expectation all pressed down without words. They assume that the prior restrictions still apply. That hesitation will hold you back, and the drive to please will outweigh your resolve. But this time, there is simply silence, a void where obedience previously was. Their ambiguity leads to uneasiness. Their gut told them that something essential had changed. In desperation, they escalate, hoping to provoke a reaction that would restore the pattern that previously kept them in control. They mock the past, flinging insults and weaving manipulation into their words. Anything to get you back inside. However, their reach is restricted. Their efforts are ineffectual against the silence that surrounds them. The version of you they previously rejected, the power they said could never exist, now stands before them. Not outraged, but disconnected. And the absence of emotion. The hesitation to engage sends shivers down their spine. Do not be tricked. God cannot be mocked since, according to Galatians 6 verse 7, whatever a man sows, he will reap. A riverfront tree does not beg for rain. An eagle does not apologize for soaring higher than those who refuse to fly. And the chosen one does not endure things that are not theirs to carry. For a long period, the balance seemed real. It seemed steady. It felt unshakable. But that's because it was never balanced. It was all about endurance. You were carrying more than your fair part of what was meant to break them, so they wouldn't have to face the repercussions of their own actions. Your patience, grace, and unshakable heart preserved the illusion. They thrived on it. They perceived your explanations as authority. Your sacrifice is an expectation you have of them, like a bottomless well from which they may draw at any moment. They never considered if you, too, could run out of steam, whether your back would ache from the weight of responsibilities that were never meant to be yours. If your sympathy was limited. But everything has a season, and that season is over. Now, the weight has changed. The ground underneath them begins to tremble. Not because you pushed them. You did not fight back, you just went away. You are no longer bearing what others are unwilling to bear. You no longer have to justify yourself to individuals who have already made their decisions. You no longer sugarcoat truths to make people feel better. And when you withdraw yourself from the situation, they are left alone to confront the reality they have spent so long denying. Oh, how they panic. They're looking for the elder version of you, the one who would rush to fix, explain, and heal. Unfortunately, that version no longer exists. They use archaic approaches like shame, responsibility, and the implicit assumption that you will always be waiting. However, they are confronted with something unexpected. This quiet is not empty. It is not cold. It is not cruel. It is the sound of unearned adoration being withdrawn. The sound of you regaining your energy, time, and spirit. The sound of individuals realizing that what they had mistook for infinite grace was never free. It was a gift, and now it is gone. Allow them to sit among the rubble. Allow them to wonder. Allow them to ask. Allow them to search for the well. They drain dry, but do not return. Do not explain. Do not go down in size to make them more comfortable. You did not come this far to help those who refuse to feed themselves. The well is closed. The season has changed, and you may choose not to return. The weight of scorn has landed heavily, not your shoulders, but theirs. They are shocked not by the loss of you, but by the realization of an imbalance they had previously overlooked. They may feel the emptiness of a one-sided conversation, as well as the misery of having their own entitlement exposed. They oppose the shift using outmoded tactics such as concealed guilt, fabricated grief, and accusations of avarice disguised as concern. However, the ground underneath them is fragile. Their illusion vanishes the moment you refuse to explain or be affected by responsibility. They need the same response and continuous presence. However, they are met with nothing. Their inquiries remain unanswered. Their desires went unmet. They never questioned your exhaustion, sacrifice, or the little ways you bent to accommodate them. However, the instant you demand acknowledgement or take away their comfort, you become the antagonist in their story. Allow them to rewrite the tale any way they like. Allow them to create tales of betrayal. Allow others to mutter about your seeming cruelty. Because, in the end, reality remains unchanged. They never got to keep what they had taken for granted. And now they must confront the true cost of a kindness they never recognized. Previously, each query needed a response. Every inquiry needed to be answered, and every misunderstanding demanded an explanation. It felt vital, an obligation to convert oneself to a language that they have refused to learn. You tried thinking again and over again, expecting that clarity would lead to recognition and patience would be rewarded with understanding. But they were not listening, were they? They just heard what suited them. They twisted your words to excuse their behavior. I misinterpreted your sadness for permission to steal more. However, the conversation has already ended before it even began. There is no statement or spectacular farewell, just one quiet transition, a door that no longer opens at their request. They immediately notice that something has changed, that access is no longer freely given. The first approach is subtle, a casual message, a comprehensive testing of limitations, an intentional pause before the expectation resumes. Then comes the accusation. The sharp-edged statements were intended to pull you back into place. So this is who you are now. It's too lovely to respond, acting as that you are superior than everyone else. But silence no longer tempts them to fill the vacuum. It is final. Calls go unanswered, and messages sit without being replied to. They fight for control, but there is nothing left to grasp. They never inquired why you bend so easily. They are concerned now that you have taken a firm position. Let them. Allow them to change the past, whatever they desire. The reality remains unaffected. Explanation was never the key to comprehension, and now they have to live with the gap they created. They felt that the door was always open. Locks now operate without the need for a key. No weapon created against you will succeed. The name is Isaiah. A lion does not turn when the jackals speak, and an eagle does not seek permission from the birds. And a child of God does not seek space in a world where they were born to walk courageously in the storm that was intended to break them, but instead cleanse them. The fire that was intended to consume, you actually polished you. And now, standing in the calm of your own strength, you realize you've always had this peace to claim. Everything seems different in the silence. The load that used to hang on your shoulders like shackles, as well as the unseen tasks that surrounded your spirit, have fled. There is no longer need to apologize for your presence or defend your existence. You wake up to discover that the air is pure. The weight is gone. You altered the world, not the other way around. There are no longer wars to fight or convince others to join. The argument ended when you realized you didn't need to fight in the first place. People perceive it. Some people greet your presence with warmth, moving with grace, without pretense, and without an agenda. They notice what you carry, the tranquility, the wisdom, the unwavering foundation that is undisturbed by anything outside of yourself. They exhale near you, at ease in your presence since they are likewise standing on solid ground. They, too, have realized that serenity is a choice, not a place or situation. But there are others, those who previously leaned too much on you without offering balance. Those who never considered that their deeds had repercussions. They're reluctant now. They falter. Their words are not flowing as easily as before. Their attempts to pull you back into their world fall flat. It upsets them, but they are unable to explain why. They sense a difference. However, they do not understand it. Something about you no longer bends to meet them or adjusts to make them comfortable. The games they used to play, the little manipulations, word twisting, and precise orchestration of guilt and obligation, fail before they even start. They fidget. They cast a look away. They want a foothold in a region that no longer belongs to them. And this is when they know what has transpired. It is not punishment, keeping them at a distance. This isn't revenge. It's just a loss of what used to support them. The well has dried up, not because it is empty, but because it is no longer available for drinking. For so long, they thought their access to you was permanent. The doors they passed through would never close. However, they never considered the truth. That as soon as you stepped into your completeness and stopped shrinking to accommodate them, they lost control. They shouldn't have had to begin with. And now they must sit in the reality they created. Because the moment you stopped searching, explaining, and fighting for a seat at a table that was never worthy of you, they realized the brightness they mistook for weakness was never within their grasp. It is not theirs to claim, nor will it ever be. The selected one. Allow them to wonder. Allow them to talk. Let them watch. But do not look back. The only choice is to move forward. You prepared a table for me in the middle of my enemies. Some. 5. A wolf in sheep's clothing may deceive the flock, but not the shepherd. A candle may flicker in the wind, but it is fearless of the dark. The flame was never borrowed. God placed it there. When you are chosen, your light is predetermined. No force, whisper, or shadow can extinguish it. They sense it before becoming conscious of their emotions. The shift, the uneasy stillness that surrounds you right now. There was a time when they knew just what to say, how to pull the right threads, and how to make the burden of their own problems into something you would willingly bear. For a long period, it worked. You absorbed something that wasn't yours. You softened your own edges. You encountered them in their brokenness and called it compassion. But that moment has gone. They now approach you with the same performance, lamentations, and invisible chains that they previously used to bind you. But something is different. Their well-prepared concerns are no longer heard. Traditional procedures are useless. They relied on sympathy and expected silent compliance. It is no longer theirs to own. They sense it. Oh, they feel it. Their words falter in mid-sentence. Their confidence deteriorates. For a small period of time, anything uncommon breaks the rhythm they had previously easily regulated. Your stillness. There was no effort to fix it. There is no assurance of a remedy. There is no attempt to soften truth for their convenience. Just silent. It's simply presence. Just an imagined border between what was and what will never be again. For the first time, they are forced to sit with themselves, which is agonizing since the weight they bear was never meant for you. And now, without your hands, they are too stable. They are left to face the problem alone. They're looking for a response. A reaction? This indicates that the prior cycle is still alive, but nothing happens. You have become untouchable, not in fury or disobedience, but in stillness and firm determination, knowing you are no longer available for draining. The truth serves as a doorway, and everyone has a choice. Some will go through it, shedding their illusions and face the reality they have spent years evading. Others will turn away, retreating into the arms of those who are still willing to accept the lies and play a game you've outgrown. So they take a step backward. They need to do it, not because they want to. There is no space for them here. Allow them to talk. Allow them to ask. Allow them to look for the version of you they've already known. But do not turn around. Do not provide an explanation. The table is set. The feast is ready. And not everyone who walked with you will sit next to you. The game was previously predictable and simple, with a well-honed pattern that required little thought. A well-placed word, a casual jab disguised as humor, a subtle reminder of past wounds, all designed to evoke a reaction, to start the cycle that ensured their domination. For a long period, it worked. But now, something has changed. The signals they relied on no longer provide the expected results. The first attempt to provoke is met with silence. They wait for the shift, the inescapable defense, the muddled explanation, to soften the impact of their remarks. But nothing happens. The balance changes, and they are suddenly the only ones still speaking. A second attempt. This time, it is tougher, louder. It rests quietly, tinged with despair. They notice it straight away. A loss of control, the breakdown of an implicit agreement. They never expected it to fracture. There is no visible rage in your eyes. There is no bitterness. There's no need to prove anything. Just a constant, unreadable presence that swallows their words. Oh, the room shifts. Not around them, but near you. The same phrases that once struck like arrows now hover in the air, weightless and ineffective. For the first time, they must listen. They're addressing themselves rather than you. Their voice, which is often met with resistance or reason, gets only its own hollow echo. And in that terrifying void, they are compelled to face their deepest fear, an unedited reflection of who they really are. There was no confrontation. There is no major announcement of severance. Just the calm knowledge that they no longer wield the power they once imagined they had. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click this super thank you button and contribute $1 or more to plant seeds of faith that will influence countless lives. Your generosity symbolizes His riches. Be a conduit for His grace and see His kingdom expand through you. They were once the guiding force, the authoritative voice that shaped your decisions, the presence that decided the course of your journey, and the source of information and advice. You clung to the illusion of knowledge. They took the map to places you had yet to see. Back then, you listened with complete trust, certain that their advice was important. However, time has a way of dissolving illusions, and ultimately, their influence will no longer determine your future. The alteration is subtle at first, like a too long glance. A tone tainted with something left unsaid. A well-put reminder of how much they have given, how far they've taken you. The expectations are evident. Deference, gratitude, and stillness. Loyalty to their prior roles. But something has changed now. You do not seek permission. Do not be afraid to make firm decisions for yourself. At that point, they know that power is slipping away from them, and there is nothing they can do to stop it. You can watch events unfold in real time. The faltering confidence, the measured words, the terrified expression that had never been before. They struggle for footing, looking for the past as if it can link them to the strength they once enjoyed. But you've already gone beyond it. They never had the power they claimed. It was borrowed, sustained only by your willingness to believe in it. Now, in the full light of your own authority, you reciprocate their lessons with a nod of gratitude before walking away. There is no dispute, validation, or ongoing request for permission. They are left in isolation, yearning for control that no longer exists. So, if the sun sets you free, you'll be free. Indeed, John, a bird does not seek permission to fly. When the cage door opens, a lion does not apologize for outgrowing the lair where it was raised, and a chosen one is not bound by expectations that were never theirs to carry. They carefully built the building, brick by brick, rule by rule. Each thing is properly placed so that you never question it. It was meant to bind you, not in shackles, but with responsibilities so tight around your soul that you mistook them for love. The hidden expectations, the quiet weight of duty, were so deeply instilled in you that you carried them without complaint. You have done this for a long time. You bore the load they imposed on you, believing it was yours to bear. But when you step back, something changes. Cracks begin to develop where there were once solid walls. The foundation they thought was indestructible begins to crumble under its own weight. Then fear sets in. Not you, but them. Because the balance they relied on was not true. It only operated while you held it up. First, they want your loyalty. They are a reminder of what they have done for you in the past. Regarding what you owe, not out of love, not from a genuine connection, but out of desperation. To keep you linked, to convince you that your freedom is too costly to pay. And when it fails, they rewrite history. They change the story and memory. Tell you that you misunderstood. You are the one who has changed too much and too fast. The pressure builds. The sentences tighten around you like a rope begging to be snapped. They are waiting for you to submit and return to the place they have assigned you. But you don't. And the silence that follows is more powerful than any argument. The first obstacle, the first refusal. Don't explain yourself the first time you say no. It shakes them. They look for uncertainty, expecting you to falter and return to the version of yourself they can manipulate. But you never do. Understanding comes slowly and bitterly. Eventually, they lost control. Some will fight harder. Their anxiety presents itself as rage, accusations, and desperate attempts to entice you back. Others will withdraw their absences, a humble admission that they do not know how to meet. You are exactly where you are today, and for a little while, you may wonder whether I've gone too far. Have I been too harsh? Is this what freedom really costs? But then you notice what remains. The hands that reach for you, not out of expectation, but out of love. Voices that are supportive rather than demanding. And at that moment, the truth seeps into your spirit, like celestial fire. The individuals who were always destined to be with you have never been terrified of your advancement. Only those who want to contain you did. They nearly totally disregarded you at one point. Perhaps they made careless judgments about you because they assumed you were still seeking acceptance, still willing to submit to the weight of their ideas. However, they made a mistake in their calculations. Something in the atmosphere around you has altered, not because you want attention, but because you no longer need it. Your remarks are no longer appealing for acceptance. They are constant, whether understood or not. The changeover is what concerns them the most. Those who previously lived in the shadows. Those who relied on subtle jabs, quiet scorn, and well-hidden dislike begin to drift away. They attempt to recreate previous dynamics by providing bait wrapped in suspicion, dropping doubts like hooks into the water, and hoping for the expected draw. But there is no response. There's no effort to explain. There was no attempt to contact them at their level. And that silence, far from being a sign of weakness, becomes the loudest answer because the space you've created is not conducive to conflict. In contrast, it does not flinch in reaction. Those attracted to your presence see the game being played and, without training, witness the unraveling in real time. Those who are unable to adapt must make a decision, grow or perish. Some double down, moving forward in a last attempt to reclaim lost ground. Their words were filled with nostalgia for the version of you that they formerly controlled. But reality dawns, creeping in with seeming finality. There is no longer access, explanation, or invitation to return to the places they formerly lived. They await resistance, anticipating old wounds to emerge and spill forth at their feet. However, all they get is silence, which speaks louder than any response. And in that terrible stillness, they face the truth they feared the most. What they formerly had over you is no longer there. They test the waters, trying for a foothold in a world where their words used to dictate how you reacted. Smirk, taunt, or contemptuous question. Bait is purposely placed in front of you, waiting for the expected reaction. But it never comes. You pass them without hesitation or ceremony, as if they don't exist. There is no defense, rebuttal, or acknowledgement. Just a clean transition from a game you're no longer playing. And at that point, reality hits them like a silent avalanche. They no longer have the same degree of influence. The regular patterns on which they relied had evaporated, leaving them adrift in their own irrelevance. It is not anger or disagreement that troubles them, but the crushing weight of being forgotten by someone whose attention they once had. They were certain that they knew you and could entice you back. However, the person they identify is no longer standing in front of them. You have matured into something beyond their reach, unbound and untamed, refusing to shrink for their sake. The realization is slow, subtle, and irreversible. They no longer belong in your reality. And that truth, more than anything else, is what separates them. For too long, they chipped away at you piece by piece, deleting the parts they deemed too much, too wild, or inconvenient. They rewrote your narrative, established what was acceptable, and convinced you that your value was based on how well you fit within their framework. But they were mistaken. This was never about becoming someone else, denying compassion, or seeking vengeance. It was about restoring your identity and reuniting the fragmented parts of yourself. Dismissed, buried behind their expectations. You will no longer have to contort yourself to fit into a space that was never meant to hold you. You will no longer regulate your life according to their acceptability. People's discomfort in your presence is not your duty. It is up to them to reconcile their own reflection, which is unaffected by your absence, yet shaken by your refusal to return. They muttered. They make conjectures. They look for signs of hesitation. But no one arrives. There is no need to explain. There is no effort to alleviate their confusion. There is no motivation to learn from those who just value the version of you that they can manage. You go on, unrestrained, confined only by your own reality. The burden has been lifted, the constraints have been eliminated, and you now stand in the fullness of your own being. Allow them to wonder. Let them watch. But do not look back. The only choice is to move forward.